If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. German Vice Chancellor Lars Klingbeil pledged in Kyiv that Berlin, alongside European allies, is prepared to provide Ukraine with security guarantees to deter future Russian aggression. He emphasized bolstering Ukraine's domestic arms production and said a ceasefire should precede peace talks. Some European states, including Germany, Britain, and France, have suggested sending troops to safeguard Ukraine's borders if a U.S.-backed settlement is reached, though Russia has warned against it. Since 2022, Germany has given Ukraine over 50 billion euros, making it Kyiv's largest supporter in Europe. President Trump said the Ukraine conflict marks a historic shift in warfare, calling it a drone war, rivaling World War II in significance. Speaking with South Korea's president, he noted drones now account for most battlefield casualties and are reshaping combat. The administration is aligning defense policy to embrace unmanned systems, issuing an executive order to boost domestic drone production and ease regulations. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called drones the biggest battlefield innovation in a generation, urging rapid adoption across U.S. forces. Officials say low-cost prototypes are already moving into combat readiness. Australia will invest $10 billion in drones, counter-drone systems, and autonomous technology by 2032, Defense Minister Pat Conroy announced. Project Land 156 will deliver rolling modernization to keep pace with rapid battlefield changes, drawing lessons from Ukraine where drones dominate land, sea, and intelligence operations. Highlighting the MQ-28A Ghostbat, Australia's first homegrown military aircraft in 50 years, Conroy said local industry is central with 200 firms involved. Despite U.S. calls to raise defense spending further, Canberra is sticking with plans to increase defense to 2.3% of GDP by 2034. French Prime Minister François Bayrou has called a September 8th confidence vote after opposition parties rejected his €44 billion austerity plan to cut the deficit, currently 5.8% of GDP. Proposals include scrapping Easter Monday and Victory Day as public holidays, freezing welfare and tax bracket adjustments for inflation, and imposing a solidarity levy on the wealthy. The National Rally, France Unbowed, the Socialists and Greens have vowed to oppose him, calling the plan unfair. If Bayrou loses, his government will collapse, echoing the ouster of Michel Barnier's short-lived cabinet in 2024. Protests dubbed Block Everything are planned for September 10th. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the 34th Independence Day in Kyiv, joined by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, calling for greater global pressure to force Russia into a just peace. He emphasized Ukraine's resilience, noting Russia's mounting losses and insisting peace must preserve dignity and security. Zelensky's remarks followed U.S. President Trump's suggestion that Ukraine expand strikes inside Russia. While both Moscow and Kyiv claim readiness for talks, each accuses the other of blocking negotiations. Zelensky stressed leadership-level talks as the only way forward, stating Ukraine is unafraid of dialogue, but Russia resists meaningful meetings. Nigel Farage announced Reform UK's Operation Restoring Justice, pledging to track down, detain, and deport all illegal migrants in Britain. The plan calls for withdrawing from the European Court of Human Rights, repealing the Human Rights Act, and suspending refugee conventions for 5 years. Migrants would face immediate detention and removal, though a self-deportation scheme offers £2,500 in voluntary flights. Nations refusing return agreements could face visa bans or sanctions. Farage argued only mass deportations will stop channel crossings, citing President Trump's U.S. policies and Australia's turn back the boats.
The public have now just had enough. And what began as a protest of mothers and concerned citizens outside the Bell Hotel in Epping has now spread right across the country.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
And welcome, a bit late, but we're looking for quarters. We even had to ask Marc Morano to help with those quarters, and he had none. Just like us. Anyway, at the moment, we've got our producer pedaling like mad. Come on, Jen, go faster. I can be like that, by the way, because Marc Morano is just as crazy as I am. Maybe a little more, but we'll find out shortly. There he is in his farmland. Maybe it's not. Anyway. Now, before we get into Mark and we talk about how nutty the world is, because it really is nuts. What about the new head of the WEF? What's his name? Larry Fink. Larry, he's a rotten, dirty Fink. Anyway, he says we need to employ $50 trillion, and that must be done by the private sector. What could possibly go wrong, Cam, if you could play green?
Larry, you've spent a lot of time thinking, writing, and speaking about climate risk. What, in your mind, is at stake if these projects in green hydrogen and sustainable jet fuel, long-term battery storage and carbon capture, what's at stake if they don't get this kind of funding?
Well, they don't get it done, then we are going to have more risk as societies. We're going to have more issues related to rising climate, and importantly, which will create more societal issues. Already, we're seeing an impact in society right now from climate risk and climate change. We are seeing insurance premiums going up 18% a year right now. So we're seeing a real impact from what climate risk is doing, from flooding, from fires. So we're seeing a big impact, and so the faster that we could find ways to mitigating the rising temperatures, I would say the more just society could be. And so to me, it's we don't have much time, and this is why. When I learned about Catalyst and I learned about what Bill was doing, it was very clear to me why we needed to be a part of this, why we needed to invest the time and the money. And the key is also the time, because we need to be learning about these the new technologies and how to move forward. And we need to then inform our investors ultimately where we think the next opportunities are going to be too. And as Bill in his book wrote about, we need to employ $50 trillion to get to a green world. With the rising deficits that we see in governments, from our perspective, the 50 trillion is mostly going to have to come from the private sector. And I do believe that money will be well spent for returns. It will transform our economies. It will build new jobs. It will build new cities and new opportunities. So I look at this as an optimist. I don't look at this as a pessimist. But the key is to be that optimist. We have to jump on it now. We have to be investing today. We need to talk about it today, although much of the problem is in the future. But we're seeing more and more evidence of the problem today.
Well, there you are. That's just mate, truly, I've seen some ghoul movies and films in my time that we have Larry Fink, Dirty Rotten Fink, and Bill Gates, Dirty Rotten Nutter, together. Marc Morano is the executive director. I can't wait for this bit. Executive director and chief correspondent for climatedepot.com and formerly with TNT Radio. Mark, I have to ask you a question, and this is a very serious question. Okay, I need to know, if you were in a boat with Larry Fink and it had also Bill Gates, and you were surrounded by these piranhas and sharks, how long would it take you to jump into the water?
It's one of those, you'd rather die by the sharks than you would have a chance to survive than you would by the certain doom of staying in that boat with those characters. $50 trillion is what's needed. And you saw Bill Gates in that interview showing nodding, and you can see like the excitement in his eyes. He probably hasn't been, I was about to make an off-color comment that he probably hasn't been that excited since he was having dinner with Jeffrey Epstein talking about their plans, but that's probably libelous. So let's rescind that I said that. But I'm at the point, I'm going to get philosophical for 1 minute. I grew up on Milton Friedman, Walter Williams. I actually had Walter Williams, the economist, as my instructor at George Mason University. I was a free market guy all along, considered myself a capitalist, loved it. But I do think we've entered an era that may have begun in the 1980s, may have begun with the GE. Jack Walsh was the first sort of prototype CEO, where America's changed and capitalism sort of entered a late stage capitalism phase. Because to me, Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, Larry Fink, Bill Gates, they're called capitalists in our world today. They're supposed to represent the free market. Is this what Milton Friedman had in mind, the late Milton Friedman? Is this what the late Walter Williams had in mind? I don't think so. Private equity running the world, we don't have a say. It's kind of like government. At least you have some indirect say, sort of, maybe, possibly. But with private equity, when you have BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard combined are bigger than all the economies of the world, the largest, factors. And there's no way you can ever fire them or control them in any real way. When they say it's private money, it's coerced. Larry Fink is famous for saying we have to force behaviors. John Kerry, this happened during Obama in terms of the climate agenda, when they basically said, we don't need no stinking democracy anymore. So what did they do? They got Larry Fink, they got the equity asset firms, and they started forcing behaviors on business. You didn't need congressional climate bills. You didn't need cap and trade. You didn't need to lobby your congressman to oppose a bill. This was all a merging of government and capital in private enterprise, so-called, a merging of collusion with these corporations into this weird corporate state in which we live. It's a new form of fascism. When Ronald Reagan warned us about the evils of big government, we were at the front of the Capitol. We were guarding the Capitol from big government. Well, around the back, we ended up with Larry Fink and Bill Gates and this corporate government fascism that we have today. And this is the world in which we live now. You have Bill Gates merging in this new catalyst firm. He's claiming that he's reorienting and not going to be giving money, and the climate funds are ending, and all this deception and chess moves and it's like a street vendor doing the card games on the street on 42nd Street in New York City. They're deceiving us. Bottom line is, this is where we are. This is why Donald Trump got elected. Now, if you want me to get even more dark, and you have to tell me if you want me to go there, I can talk about the shortcomings of Donald Trump, but I want to talk about the positives of Donald Trump. He's a mixed bag. Overall, very good, but there's some dark things that could bring down his legacy.
What are they?
Very simply, his push for AI is his biggest problem, as I see it. And just let's make this perfectly clear what artificial intelligence really is. It's not here to improve our lives. It's not here for our sake, the common man. It's not here to just to be like, oh, this is great. It is here for one simple purpose. This is the fastest way they can concentrate their power into the hands of just a few of them. And this is how you have governments now heavily investing, Donald Trump being the biggest cheerleader. We have the Department of Defense now giving hundreds of billions of dollars to AI, to big tech, to put up these data centers, which look like Soviet era architecture. I've been through Eastern Europe. I've been through all these former Soviet satellite states. It's depressing. And that's when you see, I live in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. You see these data centers going up. Every local politician opposes them. All the voters vote, and we're going to fight the data centers. Guess what, Mike? The data centers keep getting built. Gee, why is that? The unbelievable amount of money. And now Donald Trump has upped the taxpayer dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars going to these AI data centers. And the idea is this is going to be a new world in which we're living, where AI, this is when you hear the World Economic Forum, people like Yuval Harari talk about the useless eaters. This was their vision. AI is going to be taking over jobs, and the useless eaters are us. And they're telling us we have to go become psychotropically drugged or play video games. This was part of their vision as AI takes over. And Donald Trump did the other disturbing thing he's done, and I'll talk about his positives in a second, is that he's continuing this Bush-Cheney surveillance state legacy. In 2002, we had the Bush-Cheney administration propose this idea of a centralized government surveillance database. Even Democrats at the time opposed it. Republicans rebelled. This is unconstitutional. You can't have this. So they disbanded it. Hey, we won. Yay. Guess what formed the same year? Palantir, founded by Peter Thiel, currently run by a guy named the CEO being Karp and Alex Karp. And this is now the company that Donald Trump is giving huge government contracts to centralize all of the databases, at least in America to begin with. And this is to bypass the Constitution. This is a private company. This is that corporate fascism we're talking about. I'm at the point now where I don't favor privatizing the post office. I don't favor privatizing, prisons. I don't, we have all our utilities now and energy companies being bought up by Larry Fink and BlackRock and private equity firms. The recent thing about Cracker Barrel, if you look behind the headlines, that's owned by equity asset firms. I mean, they're probably, if you ever watched the episode, The Sopranos with Tony Soprano, it was the old HBO series. The way the mob worked, when someone owed you, there was a great episode where a sports, it was like a sports authority, a sports shop, a big store, owed the mob like couple $100,000. He couldn't pay it. So the mob came in and essentially liquidated his store. They sold off everything and they got all the suppliers to send all this extra stuff, and they defrauded them and defaulted on their loans and on the supplies that they got in. And the guy ended up being able to pay back the mob, but they essentially liquidated that company. That's what we're finding. When you ever hear private equity buying up these companies, that's what they're doing. They're liquidating it out all for short-term profits. In the 80s, a lot of this started changing. Jack Welch, the CEO of General Electric, all they cared about was the short-term profits of the investors, and the companies just became profit, profit, profit. I'm not talking like Bernie Sanders here. I'm not against free markets. I'm against late-stage capitalism, private equity, corporate welfare, et cetera. I'm even against all the billions they give out to the oil industry. So I'm trying to be fair across all this. So that's the problem that we're finding with Donald Trump at this point in time is surveillance state, pushing AI, and he's pushing this vision of this sort of like there's good billionaires and they're good, billionaires are good when they're working with Republican presidents. No, the problem is down the line, this is going to be used by a future president, Gavin Newsom, future president AOC, who are then going to turn this even more sinisterly against us. So that's the problem I have. Now, in terms of my world, climate energy, wow. All I can say is this is beyond anything I would have hoped for in terms of 200 actions. We now record oil and gas production. He recognizes a national security threat. His EPA chief, Lee Zeldin, is the most consequential EPA chief in history. I think he's actually doing a pretty good job on foreign policy. I didn't like the bombing of Iran, but if he did it in a way that's contained, and I didn't like the bombing of the Houthis, but it seems like people like J.D. Vance may have reined him in a little bit there. And they seem to have it. He's really trying, even though he's not succeeding. He's trying to end the Ukraine war. So on a lot of fronts, he's doing great there. On the economy, tariffs, I love the concept. I'm not sure how they're working out in the long run. We'll see. I like the idea of renegotiating. So it's a fascinating presidency. No regrets voting for him. But I just think he's, when he does stuff like the flag burning ban, executive order, whatever that is, that's come on, that's not free speech. The flag burning was a stupid issue back in 1990, and now they're resurrecting it. I don't understand that. I don't like the handling of Epstein, and I think Trump is afraid of being embarrassed, even if he's not guilty. And I think Dan Bongino and the Pam Bondi and Kash Patel have a lot to answer for. They still have to clear this up. It's clear that they're withholding information.
I just have it's very, very interesting. I'm just going through all of them, and I totally agree with you about Donald Trump. I often pose a question to our guest, providing they haven't fallen asleep. But I just, and the question is Donald Trump now a threat to democracy? And I'm always surprised with the answer, and the answer has always been most likely, which is a pity because he's done so much good. And yet we have, and you're right with the surveillance state, the data centres. I think he's floundering a bit on the international scene. I like the idea in many ways of bringing these cities into some sort of livable standard. Having said that, to bring the military to do that, it reminds me of look at countries like Venezuela, which they also are looking like they're going to attack anyway. So we've got all these movable things, but back to the terrifying people, which is Larry Fink and Bill Gates and the WEF. I just want to read you this post was put up the other day, and the Larry Fink of BlackRock, now chair of the WEF, just again intimated that the days of personal car ownership will be over.
Yes.
There'll be one vehicle for every 3 homes. What happens if you live on the land? Anyway, what's a couple of miles between neighbours? Also, there'll be one vehicle for every 3 homes. No space for privately owned land. So what happens to the farmers? Oh, Bill will own those.
It just goes, well, this is where Trump has been doing good, and Republican attorney generals have been doing good, Republican governors. Okay, I'm not on a farm, but this is a barn behind me, so it's evocative of a farm. It's it's emblematic of a farm. Bill Gates, by NBC News a couple of years ago, was declared America's #1 largest single farmland owner, followed closely by Jeff Bezos, followed closely by China. Actually, China may have been #2, followed closely by Jeff Bezos. Ted Turner, all these billionaires gobbling up land. And what's fascinating about it is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, because the NBC News raised the specter of Bill Gates. They said Bill Gates isn't the one farming the land. He's not the one in overalls. Oh, really? Do we need to be told that? In many cases, people are losing their farms because of all these regulations, because of all the foreign exports in America. And they're allowed to stay on their farm and continue to be farmers. But guess what? Now Bill Gates or some other equity asset or China owns that land, and you now are a mere serf on your land. Bringing it to your question on automobiles, Trump has done a great job, at least in America. We have got rid of the California mandate, which is a Congressional Review Act. The Republicans came up on this one big, and they stopped California from the gas-powered car bans, which was then like 40% of the country was going to have that. When Biden was president, it was 100% of the country because the EPA was going along with it. This was all done without a single vote of democracy. California Air Resources Board followed up on an executive order, unelected bureaucrats, executive order not by Gavin Newsom, no California legislator vote. All the other states followed without a vote. You had the EU doing the same thing. And then you had this corporate government collusion where you have banks saying we're not going to give out car loans to people who buy gas-powered cars. And then you have the World Bank saying we're not going to provide infrastructure funding or funding and for cash flow to car companies if they continue to make gas-powered cars. You have states like Colorado, California, cities saying we're not going to have new gas stations, so they want to create a gas station shortage. This is all designed to limit your freedom of movement. You have CNN talked openly about carbon passports, but monitored by the government to limit our travel. You have France and other countries in the EU beginning their and France has already started this, the ban on 2 hours or less, 2.5 hours or less flights. You have to drive or take a train or a bus. You're not allowed to fly anymore, and private jets are exempt. This is a world again, it's a centralization of power, and we are just treated like the masses. And Donald Trump is actually fighting those aspects of it here at the same time, loosening other aspects. It's kind of the problem is Donald Trump doesn't have a consistent philosophy, never really has on this stuff. And I think he looks at it more as like, oh, this is great. We got this big contract and the government's going to give $100 billion, to this company, and they're going to invest in America. Yeah. For AI, how much of that's even going to be seen by Americans? How many jobs are going to be lost? How many other companies are going to end up being gobbled up by, this corporate government collusion? And this is what COVID did, the same kind of heavy-handed. It sort of concentrated that power. We lost a lot of companies, both in the energy sector, restaurants. The small mom and pops get crushed. That's the America I want back, not the ones where corporate logos can change in a second, and these companies aren't. They're soulless corporate companies that don't represent anything from their original founding. So it's incredible. But Larry Fink is now. This is funny because the World Economic Forum. I still don't quite understand it. I think there's something much more sinister at play, but we won't know necessarily what it is, maybe ever. But suddenly they announced one day, maybe they just wanted to get rid of Klaus Schwab, but they announced that he was under investigation for what? For what? What did he do? Well, apparently he had lavish travel and stayed in nice hotels and ran up food budgets. And I'm sorry, the Davos, that's all it's about. That made no sense, didn't ring true. So they did an investigation and said, oh, yeah, first of all, he's finally cleared. There was nothing to find there. So the whole thing made no sense, but it was a way to force out Klaus Schwab. So we wait a few months and almost a year, I guess, or not 6 months. And then Larry Fink is now the interim chairman, co-chairman of the World Economic Forum. Larry Fink, the man who said we have to force behaviors, the man who's ahead of one of the largest private equity firms in the world, bigger than most countries' economies. This is the guy now running it. He's the one now with White House access. He's the one now that's going to be sucking down more taxpayer money. This is the world. I wish Donald Trump has a blind spot. I wish he would start giving speeches about reforming equity asset. We need to break up big tech. We need to break up monopolies. We need a restructuring and government regulation, more regulation on equity asset firms, not less. And we need to promote entrepreneurship. And the problem is that's where the world has gone wrong. And the EU has just still gone crazy, although the voters are fighting back, especially on climate. We had the farmers' protests. You have German changing. You have the rise of Nigel Farage in UK. You have Eastern Europe. A lot of great countries are fighting this whole EU dominance. The EU really is probably one of the most evil government institutions, next to people like BlackRock and the Gates Foundation, because they've stripped democracy away. It doesn't matter what people vote for in the EU. It's like this unelected bureaucracy controls everything. So it's bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. And of course, I'm working with Malcolm Roberts, and we're trying to get scientists to testify. Australia has got their battle on climate. I'm not too sure how Australia is doing on all these other issues, but the COVID was a wake-up call. So the great hope here is that people will fight back against all this. But we really need Donald Trump to wise up about AI, wise up about this corporate government collusion and all the privatization of utilities, privatization of the post office. They talk about privatization of prisons. No. I don't want that. There's no accountability when that happens. None. It just comes down to which companies have the best lobbyists and who they pay off. And it's frightening. I'd rather the most inefficient, pathetic government services than this kind of dark private government partnership. And this was a rage among conservatives for decades, back since the Reagan and Bush years. Oh yeah, we're going to privatize the post. No, bad idea. There's no accountability when you do that.
Just as we wind up, I'm just looking at some of the board members and members of the WEF.
Yes.
And it truly is it's a mixture of saints and probably very holy people. Not really. Larry Fink, Andre Hoffman. Now, Andre, by the way, is heir to the 5th largest pharma company in the world, which is called Roche. And then we had Ghislaine Maxwell's sister. She still sits on the WEF board. It's something like a Stephen King novel that is combined with these horrible aliens. And while on that subject, maybe that perceived, or the so-called spacecraft that's heading towards planet Earth at 7 miles across, maybe they're coming to collect Larry Fink and Bill Gates and take them back to their planet. Who knows? But it's very scary. I don't think we can. I used to think we could do something to stop it. I don't think we can. If you look at CBAM that's coming in and started 2027 in the UK, you look at the Australian government, for example, they're going to ramp up all their projects and bring them forward. You look at the US, which is truly a bit like helter skelter, part 2, because you got Donald Trump. On one hand, he does, and you are right, does good things. On the other hand, he does terrible things. Look at the EU, which is just basically a circus, and so on and so on. And I think government, if they want to do it, they're going to do it. Now that you got these horrible people, which Gates has always been part of it, and Larry Fink has always been a little more discreet. No more. They're out there.
I couldn't believe it. This is a big move for Larry Fink to be the co-chair. I mean, that's like, he's outed himself. It's not, you can't even pretend anymore. Yeah, Bill Gates, along with BlackRock, Microsoft, Bank of America, GM, they're now forming this new catalyst fund. And they're basically, here's the problem. People see that and they go, oh, that's the private sector. No, that's not the private sector. That's what people have to understand. When you see billionaires behind it, it's not the private sector. This is a corporate controlled, there's an actual economic term, but this is actually where the billionaires control government. Government doesn't control. So big government isn't our greatest threat anymore. It's this merger. It's this fascism. And I got to tell you, just to end on what Bill Maher said, the comedian, He said, if you were trying to prepare America for sort of totalitarianism, let me describe you some of the steps. First, you create a mass police force, get people used to looking at that. By the way, I'm completely opposed to federal agents wearing masks. They say, oh, well, they're going to be threatened and they're if that's the case, they shouldn't be federal police officers. You cannot have a masked police officer in the streets. That creates terror. That's evocative of regimes we don't want to go to. I'm sorry. I'm a lone conservative voice on that in America. I don't like that. Continuing, Bill Maher said, normalize snatching people off the street. I'm all for cracking down on immigration. I don't know how I feel about this due process. I don't like Alligator, Alcatraz. I don't like deporting them to other countries necessarily, because what they do to immigrants, they're going to end up doing to U.S. citizens. If they're not careful, they have to have some form of due process, just like I didn't want Dick Cheney and the torture going on, because if they do it to terrorists, they'll end up doing it to citizens. Thirdly, you get them used to looking at people. By the way, they had going through parks in Los Angeles, the masks, federal armed with all the, they look like jackbooted thugs. Not what I like. And also federalizing the police, seeing the National Guard and the military on the street. That's what Bill Maher said. Get them used to seeing that sort of, these federal troops in cities. I don't like that either. And DC is a special case because it's constitutionally okay, but that's where it stops. And I don't want to see Donald Trump go into Chicago. Here's the bottom line. If people in Chicago want to live that way, they want to live in hellholes, fine. Let them live in all the crime. That's what federalism is about in the United States. So I have to say I am agreeing in part with Bill Maher on that. Again, does not make me not make me hate Donald Trump. I'm not anti-Trump, but we've got to call this like it is, and that's very hard to do in today's political environment.
Yeah, and finally, the banning of private jets in France, that would also impact you, because
commercial jets, they're allowing the private jets. Yeah,
they're allowing the private jets. So
they're banning the commercial flights at 2.5 hours or less, and it did not affect private jets.
Oh, so you're fine with your own fleet of private jets. Marc Morano, Executive Director and Chief Correspondent for ClimateDepot.com. Thank you very much, sir. I see your farm in the background. Maybe not, but it does look good. And I missed the dogs from last time.
That's right.
I missed
no dogs tonight. So yeah. All right. Thank you, Mike. I enjoyed it. I hope to be back soon. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, we do too. Thank you very much. This is The World Today.
$20 or $50 or even 100 years ago, if you asked someone which of the world's countries was the most diverse, most equitable, and most inclusive, they would have almost certainly answered the United States. Not anymore. What changed? Well, nothing and everything. Nothing in the sense that America is still the opportunity-rich place it's always been. And everything because the progressive left has hijacked those three words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and turned them into weapons of mass destruction. This DEI trio makes up the neutron bomb that has laid waste to a good part of our educational and corporate institutions. Given the damage that has been done, it might be a good idea to see what these words used to mean and what they mean now. Diversity used to mean that people of different backgrounds were free to join a group or association. Equity used to mean enforcing equal standards for all individuals and groups. Inclusion used to mean allowing people of every background and identity to participate in a group or association. Now, in their DEI context, these words all mean one thing: applying unequal standards to ensure preferential outcomes for individuals and groups based on race, sex, and gender.
It can all be over in the blink of an eye. Driving tired kills.
Sometimes life can be overwhelming, and suicide may seem like the only way to relieve the pain. Beyond Now is an evidence-based app created by Beyond Blue to help you cope when suicidal thoughts start to appear. You can use it to create an easy-to-follow plan that is personal to you and includes steps like know your warning signs so you can act early, make your environment safe by removing harmful items, activities you can do or people you can be with to distract yourself from suicidal thoughts, reminders of things that make you feel strong. Some of these steps might be tough to fill out, and that's okay. It can be helpful to make or share your safety plan with a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional. You might feel like you're alone, but help is available. If you're worried you can't stay safe, use the red telephone icon to call your emergency contacts. Download the free Beyond Now app today to create your personal safety plan.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
And back again. Look, we are running a bit behind because of the head office. They just didn't want to work. Before I get into our next guest, which is Stuart J. Hooper, I just want to play this clip and come back to Stuart to get his thoughts on it. Cam, if you could play Ukraine for me, please.
Right? War's very tricky, very horrible, but with war, you never know. Things change. People go into war, think they're going to win the war, and then they get their asses kicked, and they lose their country, and they lose millions of lives. Nobody goes into a war thinking they're going to lose. They go in, I'm sure that Ukraine thought they were going to win. It's going to be, we're going to win. You're going to beat somebody that's 15 times your size. Biden shouldn't have let that happen. Biden shouldn't have. The man was grossly incompetent. He should have never been there. That would have never happened. But you don't go into a war that's 15 times your size.
So there you are. That's Trump talking about Ukraine, saying that you don't go into war thinking you're going to lose. Stuart J. Hooper is lecturer and researcher, and a PhD researcher studying the military-industrial complex, elites, war, and globalism, published on numerous news websites and in academic journals. Stuart, thanks for joining us. Trump says you don't go into war expecting to lose it. How the hell would they expect Ukraine, and why would you ever think that Ukraine, this backwater, this country that should have been bankrupt, would have any show against Russia unless they were encouraged by outside forces?
Yeah, absolutely. And great to be back with you, Mike, as well. So this whole situation with Ukraine from the very start, really back in 2014, of course, this has been from day one a proxy war between the West and Russia. And we've seen this time and time again throughout the Cold War in various places around the world, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the war in Afghanistan. It's really just a repeat of all of those really tragic histories where you look at all those three examples right there. You don't really have anything good to show for any of it. But here we are once again. And interestingly, this war in Ukraine in particular, this, of course, sparked up right after the disastrous withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan, the end of that 20-year forever war. So it was very convenient for the military-industrial complex to have this brand new conflict placed right in their lap right after the conflict in Afghanistan, of course, was wrapping up. So this, from the start, has been having its strings have been pulled from afar for all of the wrong reasons.
Because the general consensus across Europe and most of the world is they don't want war, but I can't see them. You see President Peace, I call Donald Trump, wanting to stop the war, but at the same time he's still encouraging it in other ways. Do you think this war between, and it's not Ukraine and Russia, it's NATO and Russia, or US, NATO and Russia, do you think this will ever end?
Yeah, so that is the question right now. I came out and said what Trump did in meeting with Putin was literally the best thing he has done since coming back into office because the whole world benefits if the United States and Russia are on good terms. As long as these two sides are on the war path, either directly or indirectly through proxies, that puts the world in a very dangerous place. And before Trump was elected, I said that he had a very legitimate chance of trying to end the war in Ukraine. But I thought his closeness to Israel and his backers on the campaign meant that the Israeli conflict was going to go off the rails. So both that predictions kind of come true, but my other prediction about Ukraine really kind of hasn't. And I think that's because he's gone into this with way too much bluster, expecting that he's just going to immediately be able to solve everything just because his name is Donald Trump, when the world has changed dramatically since he was in office the first time around. Even the first time around, the world was in a very different place than it was in the 1990s, when America was the only game in town. Now you've got a Russia, you've got a China, you've got an India in the news today, of course, all of which are growing, asserting their own independence in the world. And what do you know? They're all coming together. So they're forming a collective new world order outside, away from the Western sphere of influence. And Donald Trump is finding out, unfortunately, that there's not much he can do about it.
I mean, I look at I look at Germany and the UK. Why would they want to prolong this? I mean, it's going to one they can't win, but secondly, well, actually, it's two parts to this. They can't win. Secondly, they would go broke, but they know that, and I just see a lot of this is posturing and poking the bear in the nose. Why would they do this? Why wouldn't they just say enough's enough? Let's get on with trying to destroy our own countries in other ways.
Yeah, no, great question, great observation. I come at that particular question from a perspective that sees places like Germany, the United Kingdom, my home country, of course, where they have domestic governments that are falling apart at the seams for various reasons. Immigration, of course, is at the very tip top of that list of reasons at the moment. So what you tend to see is when leaders have a mass domestic failure on their hands, they will often look abroad for something to distract their populations with, to distract themselves with in some ways, to distract from their domestic failures. Don't look at me. Don't worry about what's going on domestically. Right now, we really have to go and deal with this foreign problem. This is the center of all of our ills. So this is a tactic that comes up time and time again from leadership classes the world over, really since the ancient world. So I think you're really kind of just seeing that traditional political logic playing out. These are failing domestic leaders, failing on almost every conceivable level, looking for an excuse to do anything except look at their own record.
Before it really got interesting between Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine had about 30 days left before it was more than bankrupt. It had nothing. So what happens is we have Ukraine with the support of the EU and, of course, with the US, call themselves NATO. They have a couple of year, stoush bombing, trying to bomb each other to eternity. We see that Europe now is, because they're talking about borrowing and go into enormous debt to fund Ukraine. But the fact is that they have to still borrow, which would intimate that Europe are now taking the place of this basket case in Ukraine. And they are also at the point of being bankrupt, along with the UK. And you see all the internal policies are also pointing towards running their own countries into the ground. Before I was talking to Marc Morano about the WEF and the Larry Fink and Bill Gates excitement machine, and it does create an opportunity, doesn't it, for private companies, for want of a better word or words or description. It enables these companies and these organisations to move in where government used to be. Is that, do you think, part of the long-term plan, which is coming to fruition now?
Yeah, completely. And when you look at this problem with costs as well, we had the German leadership coming out this week, or was it late last week, saying this welfare state, this social safety net, that's got to go. We don't have the money for that. But Ukraine, endless war, endless conflict. Sign us up. We'll give you a blank check, say the Germans. So that is a complete slap in the face to the German people. And of course, this is why these governments are failing. Same problem in the United Kingdom. The immigration, the inflation, the homelessness, everything, the crumbling healthcare system. But still, they've got a blank check for Ukraine. This cannot go on. But yes, what you said in terms of private companies coming in and filling the void of what were previously state functions. Absolutely. This is actually central to my PhD thesis, where I'm looking at how the American military in particular, and NATO more broadly, are now so reliant on private companies to produce military technologies for them that they are essentially having a larger voice than ever before in the decisions that governments make about their military technology choices. There isn't really any democracy to speak of whatsoever when it comes to a lot of these choices. And we've seen this time and time again in lots of places with the privatization of certain services. And I think I caught the end there, what Mark was saying, that, you know what, maybe we don't need to privatize absolutely everything, right? Maybe there is some sectors that are worthy of some degree of government control. And I agree with that completely. When you bring in private companies into certain sectors, particularly the military, that opens a very dangerous door, because that means you now have a faction that is financially interested in the continuation of violence having a major say in your military policy. So what are they going to want you to do? Start more wars, get involved in more conflicts, more interventions, more responsibility to protect, like Libya. Look how that turned out. So yeah, this is extremely dangerous, because you're opening the door to completely unelected forces coming in and taking control of our democratic futures.
I look around the world and I see all the conflict in the Middle East and the aggression from Israel. There is aggression from Israel to all of its neighbours, supported by the US, of course. I look at the conflict in throughout the EU and with Russia and NATO, again supported by the US. I look at the conflict within the UK and the entire culture of Great Britain disappearing under a mixture of multiculturalism and leaning very strongly towards Islam. I look at all these conflicts, and I look at then the WEF with their. They say that you need $50 trillion between Larry Fink and Bill Gates. They do have that quite comfortably, buying all these power stations, buying the entire world. Do you see that we are now becoming and I hate referring to it, but the book 1984, all the blocks are now being moved into position either under the guise of climate change, we've got to save your lives, so no cars, no houses, no nothing, but you'll be happy. So all these things are now moving into place: censorship, the control of the internet, Ofcom in the UK, for example, ramping up its powers. In Australia, you got the E-Safety Commission, and they say it's for looking after children, but it's not. It's to stop the swapping or moving of information between various parties. You got all this all around the world, and then you have the threat of wars, which I think are just posturing, but it does scare the bejeebers out of people, distracts them at the same time. Do you see the planet or the civilization that we once knew? Do you see it actually in front of your eyes crumbling and falling apart?
Yeah, unfortunately. And this is someone that I grew up in the post 9/11 era. I came home when I was from school in England and saw all the news headlines, even when I was very little. It was obvious that this was going to be big and important. But I don't think I expected the whole world to just go down this track of continuous warfare for literally my entire lifetime. I mean, it's just you look at everything in the direction that we're heading in, and nothing here is good. And I think Israel and the extent to which it's been able to do what it's done in Gaza, I think is a real, it should be a wake-up call for a lot of people about where conflicts can go when they're allowed to just spiral out of control. But yeah, I've been saying in my videos over on YouTube and TikTok and over on X that, if we want to actually progress as a civilization, as a society, if we actually want to grow, we've got to start doing things differently. And it's very clear that conflict is not working. It hasn't really worked since World War II. And even there, of course, there's a hell of a lot of nasty things that went on in World War II to win that war. So yeah, broadly, we need to move away from this. I don't really see it happening though, because the military-industrial complex is larger than ever before. It's more powerful than ever before. It's incorporating all of these different transnational forces, like you've been alluding to. So yeah, I don't think we're on a very positive track right now. And some of your discussion also that I caught at the end there with Trump, done a few positive things, but yeah, military on the streets, not great. Not being able to burn flags because that's a violation of the state. I mean, all this is some stuff where the slope is starting to get very slippery.
It does indeed. I think the only way out of this, and I get not criticised, but people say I should shut up, otherwise I may end up in jail. But I think the only way out of this is for a revolution, not a protest, not sitting in the streets. I think we do need a revolution of some sort, because we are being swallowed. We're being swamped. This big, massive machinery is just moving over the top. No one's stopping it. You got little people like yourself and myself popping up there saying things, but we're like the French Resistance, and eventually we get taken out too. First of all, just as we wrap this up, what do you think about the idea? And it's not a radical thought. I can't see any other way, but if you have an alternative for me, I'll be very happy to hear it. What do you think about the idea of a revolution of some sort? The French did it and did it well. We don't want people losing their heads or being burnt at the stake, because I hate that sort of heat. But what do you think we should do? Do you think we should have that revolution, or do you think the world is moving towards that without, whether we like it or not, it's going to happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a great question. This is actually what I've been trying to think more about recently as well. Like, what is the actual solution to this? But as you alluded to there, yeah, I think if you just try to spark revolution, that can often head you down a road that you don't know what's at the end of it. And it may not be better than what you've already got. Maybe better the devil you know. I've increasingly though become frustrated with just the fact that we're consistently told that this is a democracy and your vote matters, and if you don't like your representatives, just put someone else in and they'll do something different. Evidently, that is not the case, right? Your vote clearly does not matter as much as, for instance, massive campaign contributions or who you know within the administration. So personally, I would, at the very least, maybe just like us to just drop this label of democracy until we actually have something that looks like a democracy, because it's just like a consistent slap in the face at the moment. Well, you have your little vote. Your little vote is your little powerful thing. Well, evidently it's not, because nothing's changing. Things are getting incredibly worse in a lot of ways. And you look at these other figures that are rising up to the top right now, like Nigel Farage back in England, where I'm from. He sounds good on some issues, then you hear him on other issues like Ukraine, like Israel, and it's like, well, he's not really going to change too much when it comes to those kind of issues. So yeah, you may be right, but I would kind of always caution against going down that path. And like you said, also, you don't ever want to see violence, because you can't control violence, which again is the point I've been making over and over again in all of my videos. Israel, kicking off in all these different places, kicking the Iranian hornet's nest. You can't control how that's going to spiral.
I totally agree with you. I think I think we're in a terrible position. I often say to people, usually over a couple of drinks, which then I get quite emotional, but I always say that we thought when Trump got in, it would be a very boring part of our life. Welcome, but boring. It's the last thing at the moment. It's just a continuation of the schmozzle and the chaos we had prior to Trump. But you look at Starmer, and Starmer is just but there's no opposition. And you mentioned Nigel Farage. He's the perfect host for a celebrity game show, but that's about as far as it goes. Stuart, if somebody wants to find out more about your socials and enjoy your stuff on YouTube, and you haven't been taken off yet, so you're doing something right, or flying under the radar, how do they find out more about you?
You can just search for my name, Stuart J. Hooper, on YouTube, TikTok, X, Facebook. You'll find me. I post videos. And yeah, while I am posting, I can amount to about 50 views on YouTube at the moment. So throttled, to say the least, but still out there, still posting, and maybe we can get some traction eventually.
When we had a TNT, we used to feed the video to our app, and the app would give us 500,000 a month, which is pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. And on YouTube, it would show 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
So
Something's going on.
They're very good at throttling, aren't they? So, but the same thing with X. We've started the war today, which we need to do, and it's a lot.
I would recommend that you guys post on TikTok. It's a platform where I've been actually able to grow and get some organic followers, organic likes. The videos do get out there seemingly more than any of these other platforms. So I would say everyone, truth tellers out there, get on TikTok, give it a shot.
And the same with Rumble. It's that's make believe. Stuart J. Hooper, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the day. This is The World Today.